Hi, and welcome back for another episode of Analyze Scripts. I'm Dr. Katrina Fury. Of course, I have my friend and colleague Portia Pendleton here, and we are so excited to welcome a very special guest, Nicole Nalepa, who is the anchor of Connecticut's #1 morning newscast, Eyewitness News in the Morning, and the co-host of WFSB's newest lifestyle TV show, Great Day at 9 She came to WFSB in December 2013 and has been waking up Connecticut every weekday morning since. She wears many hats at Channel 3. Her newest role began in September 2022 when she was named the co-host of Great Day at 9 alongside Scott Hanley. She also hosts the weekly franchises including Family Friday, What's Going On, The Bright Spot, and 3 Things You Need to Know and When You Don't. She also has a podcast called Mommyhood Unscripted, which is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, where she tackles some of the biggest topics and least discussed issues surrounding motherhood, which as a reproductive psychiatrist, I totally love. She's a mama too and takes listeners along for the ride. And before coming into Connecticut, she did a whole bunch of things. She worked in Springfield. She did a lot of live on scene reporting. She had an Emmy-winning newscast aired on CNN, and she also spent several months at CBS in New York, interning for the evening news with Katie Couric. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right.
So we are so thrilled that she's here, A, because she's super cool, and B, because we're talking about one of our favorite shows, The Morning Show Season 3, and this is just like so exciting to talk to someone who's actually on a morning show, right? Like I'm just like dying to hear, like, what is that like? How do you wake up so early? Do you like getting your hair and makeup done every day? Is it like the Kardashians where you sit there on your phone and they're just fluttering around you? Like, do you do your own investigative work? Like, what did they get right? Basically, I want to know all the things.
Well, thank you so much, ladies, for having me on your podcast. I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, it is exciting to talk about a show that has to do with this industry because so often I always say to my coworkers, we have had so many laughs and so many funny moments, and also, emotional moments, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes. So I always say this would make a great reality show, but
Yeah.
it's hard to, right? Because in the news industry, you need to be as unbiased as possible. But I swear we are real human beings. We go to the bathroom. We do everything else that you guys do.
No way.
But it was fun. I loved when the morning show came out. I was really excited. And of course, I have to admit, I had a very hypercritical eye too, because
I bet.
whenever you see, I mean, obviously the process of how things happen, but whenever you see people who are trying to portray, anchors or reporters, you have that like anchor man, like, good morning, San Diego,
Yeah.
And that was the one thing when I got in this business. I look back at my old reels and old clips and stuff when I first started out, and I said, oh, little Nicole, she was trying to be older and tried to get that news voice, and we're all feeling it out. Everyone does when you're starting out in the business. But I remember at some point, something clicked. I think it was when I got here to Connecticut at that point, because I had a few reps in Springfield. I was actually hired as a traffic anchor, technically, here in Connecticut. I was going to be a reporter, but then their traffic anchor was leaving. And then they said, hey, you should work with this guy, Scott Haney, the guy that ate cat vomit off the bottom of his shoe alive on air. And I'm like, what? Well, I've never heard of this guy, but he was, the most beloved meteorologist and on-air talent probably in the state of Connecticut. I had no idea of his legacy until I got here from Massachusetts. And I said, wow, now I get it. This is like the magic. And at that point, doing traffic, it was all ad-libbing. I didn't have a teleprompter. So I really had to think on my feet, and working alongside him, he's so zany and crazy and unpredictable in the best way possible. And definitely in an unconventional news way, I would say that, nothing is rehearsed, nothing is fake, even in the newsroom, the morning show and the newsroom. That's another great show too. They also have those fake laughs, you see they're trying to, elicit those emotions, but they schedule it in.
Yeah.
I remember saying to myself, God, I never want to fake anything. I don't want a news anchor voice. I just want to be me. And it's worked.
That's so cool. Tell us a little bit about your take about the morning show, like what it's getting right, what it's getting wrong.
Yeah, well, so the morning show, that's from a network standpoint. So that's big time, right? That's New York. That's, you're seeing all of these operations. There's a job for everything. There's a person behind, the camera. There's a person that's running scripts. There's a person that's running you scripts. There's someone, what was it? The anchor producer, right? Someone who's set to just produce the anchor. There's someone
And there's
who's
a
producing
junior
the
and
whole
a
show.
senior one.
Yeah, there's a big
booker.
hierarchy. Yes, the booker.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish we had a booker here. But on a local level, local TV news, it is quite the opposite. And just by way of, we basically do 5 different jobs. That's just kind of how we've adapted into this industry, provided it's changed over the years. Like the 80s, 90s, that was definitely the heyday of, before the World Wide Web really took charge and came through, and these phones too, right, have changed the way we get our news. So there were more bodies, I would say, in, but I don't know even if you could see in our studio here. I'll turn you around, but we have robotic cameras. We don't have camera guys in our studio. We have literally a system that will, tell the camera where to zoom in and who to zoom in on. So we don't have camera guys like the morning show. But, obviously in New York at CBS News, when I was interning there, they have camera people. So, so yeah, that was accurate, I would say, and seeing the process, right? And when breaking news comes in and how they're all kind of, just huddling up really quick. Yeah, how are we going to figure this out? We got to get it on. We got to get it on. That's very accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you wake up so early?
So that's one thing I love seeing the morning show and how they portray the alarm clock, right? They're always like, I'm trying to hit snooze and I have to get to bed. And I love the shots, right? The close-up shots of them trying to put their shoes in the slippers and making their coffee. And that's very accurate as well. I think to work on a morning show, to some degree, you have to be a morning person. Whether you feel like you're a morning person or not, to some degree, you have to, there's some people that can do it probably and some people that can't, some people are more night owls. I worked overnights when I started in the business. And then when I came here to Channel 3, I ended up, I was working, my shift was shifted. So I think I was working 4 to 12 when I first started here. And then, shifted back, and I don't know. To me, going from overnights to getting up early in the morning, I actually got to sleep finally, like when everyone else sleeps when it's dark out.
Right.
So that was an upgrade for me. It's still tough though. I mean, my alarm goes off at 2:30. So no 3:30 alarm like Alex Levy or Bradley Jackson.
A little extra hour of sleep.
Wow.
Yeah, and she probably has a driver too. Most networks, they have a driver. They send a car and they drive you to the station. No, I'm driving myself, and I'm doing my own hair and makeup too.
No.
It
looks great.
Wow. Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
really good at it. Oh my gosh.
So that's another thing, another little myth I'll dispel. So we don't have any makeup or hair artists. Most local news stations do not. I believe, I think New York may still have hair and makeup, maybe LA, and I don't even know if Chicago does anymore. When I was interning in Boston, this is a little while ago now, but they didn't have hair and makeup then. So
wow.
Yeah, it's kind of that was, I think, probably one of the big expenses to go, as just, as you saw.
That takes skill to do on-air quality hair and makeup. That's different from your everyday hair and makeup, So that's that's expecting a lot of you to be able to do that and be a journalist.
I call it your clown makeup. I'm like, I have my clown makeup on,
You have
I'm
to put it on stronger.
Right, exactly, because these lights are very, very bright and you don't want to get washed out. But that's a skill. We do have these image consultants, most stations do, where they'll, say, hey, this shade looks really good on you. And they'll show us some makeup tips and, just recommendations, which is really helpful, right? Because it's accentuating the parts, right? And the features in your face. And so I've learned over the years from multiple consultants and at my stations, and it's been really helpful. But you have to have a thick skin too, because you're looking at your face really early in the morning every day. So And I learned that my face is not symmetrical like I always thought it was when I drew my self-portraits in school.
I think it's pretty rare to have a symmetrical face.
Yeah.
But I also appreciated that they were really honing in on how early the characters wake up, because that is hard. I remember in my residency training doing like 24-hour shifts, night shifts, shifting between night shift and day shift. It was so hard on your body. Like, it's just like your circadian rhythm isn't meant to do that. And I remember working overnight in the ER, and it was like every night right around 3 a.m. I would get so cold and tired and hungry. And I had some like senior attending tell me like, well, yeah, your cortisol level drops around this time. So like naturally you want to kind of hibernate. And so just thinking about you and watching the show, I'm like, it must be extra hard to like wake up at that time, you know?
Yeah. I think before kids, I made it work, you know, and didn't need a lot of sleep. And then when I became pregnant, and then, you know, after my second pregnancy, I'm like, oh God, I wasn't sleeping at all.
Yeah.
And that was really, that was the hardest I've ever experienced. So I appreciate my sleep now more so than I did in my 20s, when, you know, you remember being in your 20s and just, we can ride this out. We'll catch up on the weekend. I can take a nap when I get home.
Yeah. It's like, it doesn't exist now. Yeah. I don't miss that time. Well, so one thing that we thought would be interesting, and Portia, please chime in, is, again, one thing that I find myself often telling my patients these days, I would say kind of always, but especially since 2020 with COVID and the election and the social unrest in our country and everything going on, we would talk a lot about limiting your news consumption to help limit how much traumatic material you were being exposed to that you're already thinking about throughout the day. And even, you know, like our diagnostic manual called the DSM, the way they define PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder changed from version 4 to version 5, which actually came out many years before 2020. But they adjusted it so that people who, you know, before then you had to actually experience the trauma directly to be able to be diagnosed with a trauma disorder. Now they've changed it so you can either experience it directly, witness it, like be a bystander, or experience it vicariously. And I believe that was done in part to capture a whole lot of other people who are being traumatized. And I know, especially like in my training, we talked a lot about people in certain professions, like police officers, firefighters, journalists, newscasters, photojournalists who are like in the thick of it. Like we see Andre in season 3. But I was wondering if you could kind of speak to that, because I feel like you can't limit it. Like, you are reporting on it. And I just think that's got to be so hard. And I wonder, like, how do you guys take care of each other? How do you take care of yourselves? Like, is that talked about, like, in the field? Is there any, like, is anyone looking out for you guys in terms of your own mental health? Like, I feel like, I hope so.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's probably a question we don't always get. You know, we always get what time do you wake up in the morning? But, you know, of course, when we think of the serious and the more traumatic things that we cover, we don't always want to go there asking people those questions, right? But I am so happy to answer that. I can only speak, obviously, from my experience, but from what I have experienced in covering some traumatic stories, in particular, actually, the one that comes to mind when you were talking about this is the Boston Marathon bombings. I was there maybe less than a mile from where they ended up finding the brother underneath the boat that was hiding at the time. And, you know, from the moment the bombs went off at the finish line, you know, we were wall-to-wall coverage, obviously, from up until when I got a call in the middle of the night from my news director at the time saying, you know, we're sending you to Watertown, and that's where the staging area is. The brothers, like, you know, throwing Molotov cocktails at everyone. And, you know, it was just such a scary time, knowing like, okay, well, this is my job and I'm going into it. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table that night and going, I'm going to let my parents know where I'm headed now, because we really didn't know what we were going into. And I remember I had my insurance card and, really quick before I left in the middle of the night, which, I mean, I was in my mid-20s, a little over prepared, I guess. I was thinking a little bit ahead, God forbid if something were to happen.
Yeah.
But you don't know. Yeah, it's very scary, and I remember when the movie about the Boston Marathon bombings came out, I still to this day haven't seen it. And I'm from Massachusetts originally, so I just
can't.
I feel like I've been there. I lived through it enough, to experience and know what it was like. I don't really want to see a Hollywood adaptation to watch it. But I think that it is so important to keep your mental health in check. That was kind of something for me at the time. Like that's how I was keeping things in check. I didn't want to expose myself to something that maybe wouldn't make me feel happy watching and reliving again,
Right.
So I think that in this business overall, we compartmentalize because that's kind of, how you do survive some of those tough stories when you're doing, those door knocks, those awful stories where, a mother has just lost her child or, just awful. I mean, the list goes on. And I think that we tap into a place where we get the facts and we do our darndest to, deliver everything that we know and what information is going to help the public. And then I think what you do with that when you go home is really like the ultimate test there. So, for example, with the pandemic, the start of season 2 on the morning show, when they were taking the drone image, my husband and I, he used to be in the news business too. He was behind the scenes and we both looked at each other and I'm like, I don't want to watch this right now. I love the show. We loved it. And I'm like, I just can't watch it right now because the pandemic was so traumatizing for everyone in their own way. That makes me feel so good because I said, what's wrong with me? I love this show. I know that, it's okay. We're here right now. We're okay. Like, why don't I want to watch this?
Nicole. Good grounding.
I try. But I think it's just important to listen to what's not going to make you feel good in your own free time because that's your time, right? And that goes for any job, right?
But totally.
It does. I don't know if any workplaces talk about it enough. Like I know, I only know my own experience in medicine where, you're working in the ICU and there's really sick people, you're giving awful news, people are dying, there's codes, and then you just go to lunch and then you go to the next one. And then even within medicine, there's not a lot of room for you just witnessed a lot. How are you going to process it? There isn't a lot of modeling or anyone kind of checking in. I think and I hope that culture is changing. But as I think about that, of course, as a psychiatrist, I'm always thinking about these things. I wonder about other fields and the news in particular. I can never watch the news because every time I turn it on, it's like happy shooting, happy fire. It's just it catches me by surprise. So it's hard. And I just always wonder about when that's your job, that's just, it's gotta be hard. And I hope your field also emphasizes that or is starting to.
I've been very, very blessed where I've worked for, news directors who have checked in on us when we have covered horrific stories, offering support if anyone needs counseling. We've had even comfort dogs that have come in through Channel 3 here. I wasn't here in Connecticut when the Newtown, the Sandy Hook shootings happened, but I was at Springfield at the time, but I wasn't sent there. I was producing that newscast and anchoring, but I know my husband was sent there as a photographer to cover that. I also know that the photographers here at Channel 3, they were offered, anything that they need, any kind of services because, enough, we don't even need to mention, what that can do, right, for anyone who experienced it on any kind of end, directly, indirectly. So that is definite. Mental health is, I think, like you said, definitely something that's coming to the forefront more. I think the pandemic really opened it up for people who may not have realized that they've been affected by things.
We all went through that trauma.
Right, exactly. It was such a shared collective experience. So I think one of the things that I did to kind of ground myself, because got to a point where all we were doing, right, because everyone was home, nothing was going on. We were just reading the numbers too, reporting what was going on from that standpoint. So there you were, right, like in the ICU, in the medical front of things, seeing the people die, and then we're getting the numbers to report it. So we were like both working from different angles, which is crazy when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
But we were informing people and helping people in a way. And, just with all the heaviness, just that these kinds of things bring, I wanted to create something positive. So I created this segment at the time that was born out of the pandemic called The Bright Spot. And it was all about trying to focus on, okay, let's take a moment now and see what good is going on.
Yeah.
This is awful, but like, what is going on? What good is happening? Anything from the little kids doing these drives or, sending messages to the, healthcare workers, everything. There were so many amazing stories. So that kind of helped ground me too, at least during that hard news time as well. And that was like my little baby. And I just, every day I worked really hard to turn out like the best positive stories that I could find here in the States. So that was really cool. I hope I'm answering your questions.
Oh, yeah, you definitely. And I think that's so important that, again, it reminds me of the Mr. Rogers quote that I love. Like, in times of suffering, look for the helpers. Like, even when things are atrocious, there you can find a glimmer somewhere. It can be harder at certain times than other times. But if you can try to find that and hold on to it without forgetting what's going on, right? Without repressing that or ignoring it. But you need that as a human to kind of soldier on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we see kind of the tragic, like, way in which Hannah, right, from season 1, like, was not given help.
Right.
And like her helper ended up being, right, harmful. But I thought it was beautiful in season 3, in one moment, like they all kind of got together and were like meeting in the teacup. And I was like, oh, why? Yeah. And then they were all kind of sharing a moment of tribute to Hannah. And I was like, oh, like, that family kind of aspect of being a team in the newsroom, or, all of the people who were kind of connected with her. I thought that was just like a really nice moment that they kind of continued to bring her story through season 3.
Yeah.
I was really glad they showed that. And I think too, with season 3, as we sort of transition into talking about that with Nicole, I didn't love season 3, I'll be honest, as much as the first 2. And I kind of felt like the plot was really similar to Succession, with like the big, rich, fancy tech guy coming in, and then like all the shenanigans with the shareholders and the board meetings and like all the stuff I don't understand. Still great, love it. But I thought it really spoke to the importance of the news being neutral and for people being able to trust and rely on the news to get their information, and how that is something. I think even with like all the discourse about like TikTok and what's shown on TikTok versus what's shown on your TV, and like how do you figure out who to trust, and what happens when Elon Musk buys Twitter, or this tech giant buys the news. It really got me thinking like, I hadn't really thought about that in any great detail.
Right.
So it was really interesting commentary on all of that this season.
I like seeing Don Draper.
I know.
I love him.
And him with Jen Aniston, I was like, they're just beautiful.
Oh, perfect.
I know. I really liked the couple, like themselves. Yeah. I was like, they are a good match.
I know. I'd love to see them more.
Wow. Yeah. It was great. Like casting.
Yeah, for sure.
So what do you think about, like, because they talked a lot about streaming in season 2 and 3, as like Cory, right, is really on streaming. He believes in it. He wants the streaming service for, UBA. Like, what's it been like for you guys kind of navigating having Instagram, TikTok, even like Facebook? I do follow WFSB. I'm really quickly love you and Scott Haney. My mom's like very excited today that I'm talking to you. So, it's just been a huge shift with news, and I think you guys do a great job, but I imagine, the transition after transition, first with COVID, like filming at home, wearing masks, like having visors up, and then, having to do more reels, how I think of them on like social media. What's that been like for you guys as it, compares to the morning show or just in general?
Yeah, I think in general, it's just with anything, technology changes things. And You got to keep up with things. And as we saw, right, in the morning show, how, Cory kept pushing, we got to go to streaming, we got to go to UBS Plus. And he was upset, right, that they like waited on it.
Yeah.
And I definitely think the pandemic, just, generally speaking, with this industry as a whole, we realized that we can do a heck of a lot more on our phones, right? We can stream live and report live from wherever we are. We have capabilities to do that. We, like you said, social media, the Facebook live stories, that was huge, right? Doing all of those live stories. And it's so interesting to see this industry shift again. And it's exciting in the sense that we're keeping up with things. We definitely like have our pulse on like what's new, what's the latest, what's going to reach people, what's going to help people. It means that there's a lot less downtime. Not like there was any downtime before, per se. You go into work every day and it's a brand new day. That's what I loved about this industry. You're not like necessarily, unless if you're working on a special sweep story or something, or, like a feature story, you're not necessarily, it's not the same day after day after day, right? Every day is different. Every story, is different than the day before, even if it's an update to a follow-up to a story. So I think that this has helped continue the dialogue of stories, So when we have what's on air and then we switch to streaming, it's kind of keeping things going and the dialogue going on stories. And it's making sure that viewers know that, hey, we haven't forgotten about this. We're still asking those questions and we're still following up on it right now, So it's not as much of a, to be continued ... It's kind of like, all right, here's what's new.
Yeah.
Here's what's happening now. And here's what's happening next. This is the latest that we have at this point in time. So, and we're busy doing that, with all the streaming stuff. And so to answer your question, I think that it's giving people what they want. And when you think of all the younger generations now, most of them are getting news from their phone more often than not. So if you want to stay relevant and you want to put the important information out there that people need when they wake up in the morning, that's the way to do it.
Yeah. That is a lot though. It's like you're always on, right? Like that was one thing this show really captures is like whenever the news breaks, all right, it's time. We got to go figure it out no matter what's going on.
Yeah, I always say I feel like I'm always in transit, but I always had this personality before I got in this business. So I think I was attracted to that, and it was a great fit for me.
Yeah,
I
lot of adrenaline.
Yes, I always succeeded in chaos, always from a young age.
I get that.
So I like that. I like that adrenaline rush. I like being able to help deliver important stuff. And I think that there's such a huge responsibility that comes with that because, you have to, like I was telling you before about the anchor voices and stuff, like you have such a huge responsibility delivering certain stories to the people. And in a way where like, you have to be an empathetic person, if you really want to reach people and if you're really feeling it, like you just got to like say it from the heart when you do it. You know what I mean? And I almost like, in a way, I wanted to like reclaim that when I got in this business too, because it's so hard. What am I trying to say? We grew up watching, news anchors and stuff. And then Anchorman comes out, the movie, right? With Will Ferrell.
Love it.
But it's like, I just want people to feel like we're just talking to them. And there's no ego. There's no, coming up today, like, I don't want that. Like, let's just
anchor
talk.
voice.
Yeah. Because people are letting you literally into their homes. Like every day you're part of their routine. And I have to be honest, I don't really think about that. Like when we stare into the camera, I'm not thinking about how many people are on the other side of that lens. I'm literally just like talking like I would talk to my mom or to a friend, or hanging out with my coworkers, like it's a very surreal experience. And I realize it's a very wild job to have. And one, I guess I don't think as much about, I know what I do and I know it reaches people, but I don't think I understand the extent and how impactful it is sometimes until I see a viewer, like when I'm at the grocery store or someone, they'll be like, hey, Nicole. And I'm like, oh, hi, I don't know that person's name. And then I'm like, oh, wait, they probably watched on TV. So
yeah, that's so funny.
It's funny. It still is like, it's still a novelty, I guess, in a way to me.
It's also got to be like a skill to be able to like talk to a camera, like a row of robot cameras in such a personable way, right? Like even if there's a cameraman or woman behind it, there's a human there, So I feel like that's just a really interesting skill to have.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, if you can comment at all about, one thing that I think Portia and I were thinking might be similar between therapists and newscasters is, and you could tell us if we're wrong, but it seems like we see in the morning show, Bradley can have a hard time. I mean, she does a good job, but her view, right? And like sometimes I think it seems like the network wants her to be more neutral or like not talk about certain things or keep it here, don't go there. And I feel like as therapists, at least in our role, it's really important to maintain a sense of neutrality when, especially when you're helping your patients navigate COVID or the 2020 election or the January 6th riots. Like, how do you maintain that neutrality so they feel open to talk to you? That's different from like what you do. But I wonder if you can comment at all about like what that's like to comment on such charged things, and if the morning show, like how your opinion about how they're portraying that.
Yeah, it is nice to see like the extreme example of someone in this industry, what it would probably look like when struggling with that. You see that internal conflict play out outside, even on her face, you can really see it. Whereas, right, Alex has a better job at just holding things together. And I remember her saying actually like, I do something control. This is what I do really well.
Like damage control or something.
Yeah. This is what I'm meant to do. I'm great at doing damage control. Like she's good at reeling it in. But yeah, so you see the two extremes.
Yeah.
I think that at least what helps me in those situations, because at the end of the day, we all have opinions on things, whether or not we make them vocal or not. But I think that just like any job, it's almost like we took this unofficial oath mentally to do this public service and, acknowledge that there are going to be people who are on both sides of the aisle and a lot of people who are unsure too. And your job is to not do anything from where you're standing to move their point of view. You just have to stick to the facts. Exactly. And just, I know I wouldn't want someone trying to sway me one way if I'm turning on the television, and that's what those editorial shows are for. The news is so different. You just literally stick to the facts and also make sure that both sides are reflected in a story, which is also so important too, because you have to get both sides of it. Even if someone isn't going to comment on the story, you have to let the viewers know that you tried to get their comment and, they wouldn't return our calls.
Yeah.
You might hear that in some news stories.
There's a moment at the end of season 3 where Chip is like making this on air live after he's, let go, like statement about, why, Paul Marks like shouldn't buy the network and what the risks are. And what I really liked, and again, it feels really relevant just to like current events. It's like he's, and this is how we fact check, and we get the alert. We call the police officers in this random town. We get the statement from them. Then we go there and then we fact check on this way. And it's like, we do this whole thing just to get the story, just to be able to promote it. And it's like, I think so many people for the morning show, like I never realized that, all the 40 people, yes, it's a big show, like, all behind the scenes doing all this work overnight, like getting everything right. And it's so important. I love that you said kind of taking that oath, because Katrina, like you were saying, we're all kind of in like a position of power, right? Like with our clients, with the viewers, that, it can go wrong really quick if you kind of like abuse, the relationship you have with your patient or with viewers. And season 3 just really felt like that was kind of a big message that they were trying to get out. And it's just really important.
What happens when someone like Paul Marks, who has a proclivity, you could say, for abusing his power, is now being given a lot of power that could sway things in a major way. I thought that was just like an interesting commentary.
What do you think about Paul Marks? Like diagnostically, I mean, obviously we think he's attractive, but like,
I guess there's
looks
no
aren't everything.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty well known that I don't remember the statistic off the top of my head. I think it's pretty well known that when you're in such a high position of power, there is some degree of sociopathy. I don't mean that people in really high positions of power are out like being serial killers, but there's some sense of stepping on someone else to get to where you want, some sort of lust for power that comes from being able to get to those super, super high positions. Again, it's not everyone in the high position, right? But it's like a higher percentage of people in those uber high positions than the average person. There's some sense of that. And I felt like, I feel like they could have gone a little more with him and made him a little more cutthroat, like kind of in the Succession realm. Like, I guess, I don't know if you watched Succession, Nicole, but that was a show we covered.
I watched like the first episode or two. I've been so awful finding time to watch shows lately.
Yeah.
14-month-old,
enough said. We don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
But I feel like they really went there with Logan Roy in a really cutthroat way, whereas Paul Marks was more mild, but you still got enough of that flavor. Like when they talked about, what happened with Stella at Stanford. It seems like he, I guess on paper, did compensate her for her programming or whatever she had done. That's where it goes over my head a little bit. But like clearly not enough. Like he knew it was going to be worth way more than he was offering her. Like those sorts of things.
And then all the NDAs, like
all the NDAs. Right. I think it did really just like speak to that, a little sociopathy, some narcissism, but again, more of like this covert way. Would you say, Portia?
Yeah.
Like trying to portray himself as like earthy and
very
like
charming.
Very charming. But he had that edge, and we really saw that when he threatened Bradley near the end of season 3 and when she quit, right? Like he knew all this stuff. It was clear he was surveilling everyone. I think he was the one who leaked the photo of him and Alex. I think we never really got an answer.
It seems like that would be accurate.
I was trying to figure out, like, were Paul and Alex really connecting in a genuine way? Or was it like Alex met her match and it was like narcissists using each other to stay on top? I the whole time I couldn't really tell. And then near the end, it really did feel like she was really, like, I think they did really genuinely care for each other.
Yeah. Because the
as
loss
much as they
was
can.
hard. I think her kind of having to make that decision to ultimately like betray him, even though he betrayed her, I think was really hard because I think she had, she almost felt, it reminded me of like, I think Alex felt like he really saw her and she could be herself with him, which was like this uber powerful woman with like, wanting to be more and maybe own a network and like work really hard. And she's really smart. And she never got that opportunity from like, some of the past owners of UBA. And so I think she was really hurt by that. And it reminded me of Cory and Bradley's kind of like special, unique relationship where Bradley felt really seen by him and like her authentic self. So I think it's almost like Alex was grieving that, like being able to
who
be
she
herself.
Thought he was rather than who he really was, which I think a lot of people leaving a relationship with someone with narcissistic traits feel is they're grieving who they thought the person was rather than who they really are once they see who they really are. I do feel like in general, I love Alex Levy. I love Jennifer Aniston. I love her character. I don't think it's accurate that she wouldn't have been as narcissistic as she had been before. Like it doesn't just like go away, unfortunately, for the most part.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's another character who could have brought that side out that we weren't seeing.
Right. Yeah. It was just weird to me how like for so much of the season, it seems like quieter to me.
And it was very loud in season 1 and 2.
Right. In a very big way. And again, I guess, it is known that like sometimes people with personality disorders peters out a little bit as they get older. but not all the time. And she's, when I say get older, I mean more like elderly age, not like, Alex Levy's age,
Yeah.
Would you say she has a personality disorder?
I think if I was diagnosing Alex Levy, I would, based on season 1 and 2, diagnose her with narcissistic personality disorder. Based on season 3, I feel like we see more empathy than we've seen before. And so from like a mental health perspective, I don't know how accurate that is. Based on season 1 and 2, it was, at least to me, very clearly NPD, like in your face. I don't think that just like goes away. But I think her as a character is very fascinating. And I think they wanted her to have more of a, like this arc. And she does, I guess, sort of at the end come in and like save the day, which is like great.
Which is also the like self-importance, like, and
exactly,
I mean,
yeah,
she does get, agreement from the other network, and like she talks to Laura, and I thought that was kind of awesome. I don't know. I felt like, go women, and everyone's working together.
Girl power.
Yeah, girl power. But it's almost like though she is like the savior. So it could be maybe.
Right, but it wasn't in like a icky way.
No.
Like, I guess I felt like her narcissism was coming back out when she was like in cahoots with Paul to like start her own thing, and was like, but you saw how much she was grappling with how it was going to affect the 20,000 employees. And like, I don't think Alex Levy from season 1 or 2 cared about that. Like, we saw her like going to see Mitch in Italy, like kicking off those other people on their plane so she could get out, right? Like, that level of narcissism in reality doesn't just go away. Whereas in season 3, we really saw her really like racked with guilt over going through this, and then totally changing her mind when Maggie Brenner kind of reminded her, like, Bradley was really there for you. And she could really see that, right? So again, love it as a show. I think as a criticism, I think unfortunately it doesn't happen that way, although we always wish it could.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Why we have a podcast.
Yeah.
Exactly. From a therapy point of view, could a traumatic event such as the pandemic, it seems like that was almost a turning point for where we saw her personality kind of shift a little bit, right? She realized like she was so grateful to be living. She was so grateful that she was given another chance, right, at her job. And it opened up the way for more opportunities. Could that kind of water down that narcissism?
What do you think, Portia?
Well, I'm like always optimistic and filled with joy.
Me too.
So I feel like, at least even if we think about it like mechanically, like trauma impacts our brain. So like structurally, it could have changed her brain, how she processes information at a time, especially like the length of the pandemic, and then all of the other collective traumas after that with everything that was going on, and especially considering her job and reporting on it. Maybe like, I don't know if it would shift her. I think if someone is truly narcissistic, like, no, it could change how you relate to things. Like, you were hurt by X, Y, and Z happening. You might feel the physical sensations, the change in the worldview, the other symptoms of PTSD, but like at your core, I think it's like still going to come back to you being like selfish or just grandiose and kind of not looking out for others, like a little bit of lacking empathy. But that's why I think it's like, maybe if we think of it as a spectrum, like she has maybe a lot of the narcissistic traits and she didn't really have narcissism, and then the trauma would more so like be more likely to impact her.
Like, I think when we think about narcissistic personality disorder, right? Like, when we think about personality development as a whole, we all need some healthy degree of narcissism to have confidence and self-esteem and put yourself out there. But like, what balances that like sense of self-importance in the world, like, and you probably see this with your children, as we see with many children. When you're younger, you're like little narcissists. The whole world revolves around you. Your parents hopefully cater to your every need. Whatever you need, that's met, like at all other expenses. Like, that's developmentally appropriate. But then usually as you grow up, you start to appreciate that there's other people in the world too. And the way you relate to them, in psychology, we call it object relations, is really important. And that is the part that gets kind of stunted in people who have narcissistic personality disorder, where they have a really hard time holding on to conflicting feelings about themselves and others, like being good and bad at the same time. They can't tolerate being bad at all. And really, like, deep down, the core wound is they feel useless, they feel worthless, they feel really bad, but they can't tolerate it. So they have to like project it out onto other people, put them down, put themselves up here, to sort of maintain their own inner sense of goodness. They haven't learned how to like see other people for who that other person really is and appreciate the complexities, that that person's good and bad, and so am I, and we're all okay. They can't really do that, if that makes sense. And so I feel like in seasons 1 and 2 with Alex, we really saw that a lot, where it was her, everything is for her. Like the way she treats everyone, the way she treated Chip, everyone's almost like
Bradley.
a chess piece. Right. Everyone's like a chess piece you're moving around for your own agenda. And season 3 was like so different, which great for her. I just think like in my clinical experience, when someone's like that degree of narcissism, it doesn't shift that much. Even a trauma, like, and again, maybe you always hold out hope, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's very hard to do therapy with people with narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah.
So interesting. It's so, I just love listening to you guys talk. I love talking about like psychology and like getting in depth with feelings, and that
we like it too.
I love when you guys break it down like that.
Oh,
break it
thanks.
Great.
So I want to be respectful of your time. There's so much more we could talk about, but did anything jump out to you, Nicole, about this season, or the relationships, the dynamics that really spoke to you or resonated with you?
I think when you see the camaraderie, like you were talking about, at the end there, you are a family, right? You're working with these people day in, day out. Some people you're spending more time with than your own spouses.
Yeah.
And you're also working through some horrific stories and traumatic situations, and some really amazing, joyous stories, that you're celebrating with each other as well. So it's a very close-knit community. And I would say that it's a smaller business than you may think. There are a lot of people. You never know who is going to advance, on in the industry, which is why you should always be kind to everyone. Of course, that doesn't always happen, unfortunately. Let's be realistic, right? In life, there's always those who just struggle with that a little bit more. But I have found, and I've witnessed, and I've seen enough at this point where I've seen people, who I may have, known, who I've interned with, who just, you never know, you might find yourself working with that person, which is great, but with that said, people will always remember how you make them feel. So always treat people with respect and be kind, because that also does come back around too. And, there are people that, unfortunately, like in any industry and workplace, people hear, and someone knows someone through someone else. So I think that is like a huge theme, to just never burn your bridges and just always be a kind person. At the end of the day, everyone's trying to do the best they can. And sometimes people struggle in other areas, but you just got to give everyone a little bit of grace. And yourself some grace too.
Yeah.
It's not an easy industry to work in, but if you love it, like you can tell, you want to stay in it.
It feels like you love it. So that's very...
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I love helping people. So this kind of like helps satisfy that need to reach people and help people. That's always been like something I've loved to do. So
yeah. Well, we'll have to see what happens in season 4. We have a lot of questions, what happens with the network? What happens with Bradley? Like, is Cory, still attached to the network? There's so many places to go. We met his mom this season.
Oh my
Feels
gosh.
really manipulative.
What did you think of his mom, Portia?
I mean, I feel like I don't know. Like borderline? I mean, manipulative and cruel, maybe narcissistic.
I feel like it's exactly who I would have.
Like, I don't know.
I feel like it's exactly who I would have thought his mom would be. Like you could just sense like he brought Bradley there as like a buffer, which I think often like people with personality disorders, especially narcissism, do better with a crowd because they want to like put on a good show, right? Whereas when you're one-on-one with them, that's often when you get their cruel side and like the real them, you know, like children of people with personality disorders like this will often talk about like no one knows like the real them. There's like the persona everyone else sees as charismatic, gregarious, bubbly, kind person, and then there's the real one. So I felt like him even just bringing Bradley to me was like diagnostic. And then she was so cruel with what she said. And it was this interesting dance of like codependency, like needs him to fill this void and he's constantly trying to fill it for her. But then she rejects him when he fills it, or especially if he has his own need that doesn't align with hers and doesn't keep her in the center of his world. And like, then she's mad at him for staying away. And it's like, of course he's staying away. Like, look what he gets when he comes around. You know, I was just like, I'm so glad we met her.
Yeah.
And she was spot on who I thought she'd be.
Definitely cluster B vibes. Like,
yes,
just very, you know, a mix of both. I think we didn't get her enough. I want more from her. And I think though for Cory, we talked about last season, like, you know, sometimes he appeared manic, but then I was like, or is that just the industry? Like, he's just like,
I think you have to be like, you got to be like,
gotta be ready. Yeah, you gotta be ready for anything.
You gotta like jazz yourself up. And like that scene with him and Bradley driving home in the car where she's trying to like empathize with him and he's shutting her out because he just can't go there. I think it's so painful, especially when it's your mother of all people, like you still love them. And she's trying to say to him like, Cory, I care about you, you know? And he's like, no, Bradley, we like mutually use each other. And I was like, oh, there it is. There's his impaired object relations. Like he's struggling too, you know? And just real quick before we wrap up, we got to talk about the Bradley and Hal and Laura Peterson of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. So she protects Hal. She's at the January 6th riots. She's filming. She gets like pepper sprayed her eye, hiding her identity. So she gets all this great footage. And then she sees her brother there assaulting a police officer. Like,
I was like, of course, Hal.
And Hal is someone who we would consider like kind of diagnostically to be like vulnerable to ideas, beliefs, cults. Like, you know, he's in recovery. He's kind of searching for an identity, a purpose,
for connection, for love, for community. So like, and just like they portrayed him all along coming from the Deep South, you know, like, I just was not surprised he was there.
Yeah. Yeah. So she deletes the footage, right? And like that, the FBI investigates and blah, blah, blah. And Cory protects her. And then, you know, Paul threatens her. And it's just like Laura finds out, right? Because she thinks that Bradley's cheating actually on her with Cory, not anything like the FBI.
Right. But then she finds out and so quickly like washes her hands of Bradley. And I was like, like I get it, especially with like what we were talking about, how important journalistic integrity is. And with something like that. But I also get that it was her brother. And it's like,
it's both.
I just feel like Bradley's always in like this impossible situation. Like that's the role she's played in her family. It seems like the whole time, right? Like they harken back to when she told authorities about her dad, like, you know, killing the child and the drunk driving. And I just feel like she's always in this impossible position. And I just want to see her in therapy in season 4. I was so sad we didn't see her go to therapy.
And I think
Laura
it's
tried to get her to go, right?
Laura did.
She tried. I know. And that was like such a beautiful conversation about like how to encourage someone you love to go to therapy. I was so hopeful. And then it was clear she didn't go.
Yeah.
She's not ready yet, but maybe now.
Yeah.
Maybe I would love to see
it. Because she's walked last scene.
It will be.
She's walking into the FBI with Alex as a support, not Laura, and with Hal, and then the season ends, and we'll see.
I know. We know it's coming back for season 4. I'm really excited. I do love this show, and we'll see where they go.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Nicole, for joining us today. Do you want to just share where people can maybe find you, your podcast and stuff like that?
Sure. I'm on social media at Nicole Nalepa TV, NicoleNalepa TV. I also have my podcast, Mommyhood Unscripted. You can find it on Apple and Spotify and wherever else you listen to your podcasts. And I'm always looking to hear from moms to see what kind of issues and topics that they want covered, because let's face it, we still have a lot we're discovering, I think, as moms in this era. So we got to keep the conversation going on that too.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much. This was such a joy and a treat. And you can find us at Analyze Scripts Podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And we'll catch you next time with a brand new episode.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.